How's it going, everybody? I'm your host, the Carolina Collector. Before I begin, I want to give a big shout out to each and every single one of you for helping to make this channel what it is. If you like what you see and you enjoy the content, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, comment in the comments section below, and hit the bell to receive notifications. Also, check out my eBay store, the Carolina Collector 001. The link is in the description box of every video and short that I upload here on YouTube. Thank you very much to those that have done so already. I actually got a couple more orders that I'll probably get out tomorrow for my customers. It's going to be pushing 100 degrees today, so I highly doubt I'm going to go outside today. But anyway, thank you so much for helping to support the channel. So I wanted to get into this because there are always misconceptions about why collectors collect the things that they do, especially when it comes to sports cards, jerseys, sneakers, etc. And you can treat these hobbies any which way you want. Unfortunately, there's a lot of nefarious behavior that does occur throughout the various hobbies. Unfortunately, with scalping and everything else, you really can't enjoy it. But when you're able to get your hands on these things without having to jump through hoops, it really takes you back to a more innocent time. And I have some examples of that right here in front of me. I think the ultimate answer to why hobbies mean so much to people, and I've talked about this in previous videos, it's not just about escapism. It's not just about trying to forget about our problems. I've discussed even recently in my most recent video about the issues that I'm going through currently. And, it's just not right, to have to bear so much emotional burden, with my dad passing, my buddy passing, especially with the woman I was with for the past year after what she did to me. It's not so much about escapism as, for me, there's a connection to my youth. I'm getting older. I'm almost 50 years old. I just turned 48 this year. And everything that you see here, I grew up with as a kid. I mean, a lot of this stuff, obviously, except for these two baseball cards here and that Don Mattingly jersey, which I'll show you in a little bit. All of these are retro reissues or updated versions of their original figures, etc. But basically, it harkens back to our childhood. There's an innocence about having this sort of thing. I know some people look at grown-ups collecting toys and stuff to be, pretty much oddballs and, are weird and strange and all that. But, with everything the way things are going today in today's goofy political landscape, with people being violent and one side hating another, who's telling who to love another and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I've got my personal feelings about certain things, but for me, I'm not out there burning police cars and, throwing rocks at ICE agents and all that kind of stuff. It's too violent out there. I mean, I don't even go out like I used to. And this reminds me of when things were much more innocent, where you didn't have that kind of violence. You didn't have people taken to the streets all the time and rioting and I've been assaulted multiple times myself, even now, because of what I've experienced this year. And you can watch the previous video where I discussed that. Enough is enough. You get tired of, being worn down by society, the way things are going. You get worn down by the news. That's why I unsubscribed from all of those left and right-leaning news channels and commentators and talking heads, because it's the same drab thing all the time. It literally brings you down. And a lot of people tend to, I'm not saying you have to be a big man-child or a man-baby. I'm not wearing Superman pajamas or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But after a while, it's not just collecting toys and baseball cards and sneakers and jerseys and all that. You got people that collect stamps. You have people out there that collect coins. You got people that collect cars if they're baller enough to afford that kind of stuff. It's just, sometimes you need to lose yourself in your own little world just to get away from all of this stuff, But when it comes to like the retro space and the collecting space that I partake in, it reminds me of how innocent things were when you were a kid. You know, I pick up Skeletor and He-Man right here. Obviously, I'm not running around my apartment playing He-Man. You know, these guys are statues on my shelf here in my living room, but you know, I'll take a look at them, pick them up once in a while, put them in a pose. I actually have the original cartoons on my computer, so that'll make me want to watch some retro cartoons and whatnot, just to kind of like take a break from all the bad news and violence and nonsense that we see on TV. So, and get these guys off to the side here. You know, it's like baseball cards. You know, like these guys. I mean, I know they're PSA 10s, and these are very expensive cards. You know, you got the notorious Ken Griffey Jr. star rookie and a card that I wanted for so long, a Don Mattingly rookie, which took me a while to save up for and finally purchased. I mean, the price of these guys now is just out of control. Jesus, but try to imagine when you were a kid. I remember when Upper Deck came out. I was in junior high school. Excuse me, and a lot of guys are collecting Upper Deck tops, Donruss, Fleer, even Garbage Pail Kids and all that kind of thing, you know, and it reminds me of sitting at my old junior high school thinking about opening up these kind of cards. Well, you got the 84 Mattingly here, so I would have been in elementary school at that time. So try to imagine, you know, when you're learning your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and you're learning the basics, you know, it reminds you of that sort of thing. It brings you right back to that point in time where it's like, wow, you know, it was so much simpler and so much easier back then, just being a kid. Pardon me. And that goes for the Transformers as well. You know, whether you saw them when you came home from school or if they were on, you know, during the Saturday morning cartoon rush, which is unfortunate that kids can't experience what that's like. I mean, my younger brother and myself, even before my sister was born, my mom used to keep all the sugary cereals up on the top or inside the top cupboard in the kitchen. And my brother and myself, we would climb on top of the oven and climb on top of the countertop and dig through the Cheerios and all of that kind of thing and find the Frosted Mini Wheats or Lucky Charms or Fruit Loops or what have you and pretty much eat the whole box in one sit down. But my brother and I used to club each other to death, you know, fighting over the little toy inside the cereal box. But, you know, there was a charm about waking up 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning and, you know, you've done your schoolwork and all that stuff and you immediately start off with Voltron and Pee-wee's Playhouse and Galaxy High and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all that stuff. I mean, there was an innocence about it, you know, especially if you had the toys like I got here. I mean, these are retro reissues, of course. That's Missing Link Prime, and that's the 16 Special Megatron. But, you know, it opened up your imagination. You know, you can make your own adventures with these guys. It wasn't just what you saw on TV, you know, when you were a kid. And if your friends had Transformers, you can either be the Autobots or the Decepticons or whatever. It just takes you away, you know, when you see these things up close and if you handle these things. Same thing goes for Nike Air Jordans, for example. That falls into that category. These are the 2025 editions I already reviewed on the channel, and even these harken back to my childhood because nobody dropped their drawers, nobody wore baggy pants. Nobody walked with a fake limp, you know, like you see a lot of these gangster bros walking around, you know, not bending the brims on their baseball caps. They didn't do any of that kind of stuff. But once that gangster rap stuff came around, it pretty much, to me, just ruined, you know, my love of hip-hop and all that stuff. Because then it went in a completely different direction where everything is about sex and violence. You know, even with heavy metal these days, you know, I don't even listen to too much heavy metal anymore because it's out of control. It's too political. It's not for me. I don't want it anymore in my life. But, you know, all of us as kids back in the 80s, you know, had Jordans, we had Nikes, we had cross trainers, you know, we had all that kind of stuff. And it's not just Nike Airs, you know, we had Reeboks and Converses, Kangaroos, all that kind of stuff. And it was just innocent. This represents innocence to me. You know, being a Yankees fan, this is one of my more rare jerseys, especially with it being in my size. This is a size 48 Don Mattingly jersey, which it's the fan version from the time. Unfortunately, with the Yankees, as you know, they're very strict when it comes to their uniform policy. Well, except for recently, because, now they're using sponsorships on their sleeves. But back in the days, they never had things like this on their sleeves. This is an official Rawlings fan replica, but the player jerseys would never even have this on their sleeves. The Yankees are very strict with that, but to have a vintage Rawlings Don Mattingly jersey, I mean, this thing is just amazing. Of course, it's made in the USA, or was, past tense, made in the USA. And then, of course, we have something like this, which is a modern take on a New York Yankees player jersey. This is Don Mattingly's Mitchell and Ness kit with the Mickey Mantle number 7 and black band on the sleeve. It's just, it was innocent. It wasn't complicated. You were a kid. Being an adult, especially today, as spoiled as so many people are, as vicious and vile and cruel as people are today, especially when it comes to politics and everything else, and one group trying to control another group and telling another group what to go do with themselves. And it's refreshing sometimes to just pick this stuff up once in a while, fiddle around with it. I'm not saying that you have to play with toys as a big kid or as an adult or something like that. But what I am saying is that it's just for a little bit, it takes you away from everything. Obviously, I've talked about my personal issues that have unfortunately overwhelmed me to such a point that emotionally it's become too much anymore. And, I'm being forced to make decisions I probably wouldn't make if people were just more simple. With technology, I don't want to sound like the Unabomber here or anything like that, but technology has really spoiled people with instant gratification. You go on the media and everything is, sensationalized, and it's too much. It's really too much. This stuff, for me, reminds me of a simpler time when you didn't have to worry about anything except for being a kid. And I'm a proud collector. I love collecting this stuff. I love taking a look at it again. I'll pick up an Optimus Prime once in a while for my collection and just fiddle with him a little bit, and then that'll, segue into me watching a couple G1 cartoons, and then, my mind will be at ease from all of the stressors or stresses that, I'm going through currently. But it was just innocent. It was simple. Obviously, we all get older. We all age. Ultimately, well, I don't have to tell you what the ultimate outcome is, because that's what truly makes us all equal. Including the blood flowing in our veins and the food that we eat. We all have to eat. We all have to breathe. We all have to involuntarily blink our eyes, upright walking, posable thumbs, all that stuff. That's what makes us equal. Otherwise, we're all very different. We all have different skill sets, intelligence levels, social skills. We're all different. And even with this video, I find myself almost getting political, and I don't want to do that. What made us the same as kids? Fun. That's what made us the same. Having fun with things like this, where life wasn't so complicated. And it doesn't have to be complicated. With all these talking heads that I see here on YouTube and on, TV and in the news, one of the best things I ever did for myself is just unsubscribe and get away from all of that. Even myself, politically speaking, I've toned it down a lot, because it's, even for me, you look at it, you become something that you never thought you would become, whether you're on the left or you're on the right, not so much conservatives, but I mean, you see what's happening with leftists. I mean, look what happened with that long-haired Asian guy that shot at ICE, for example. Look at the one that took a shot at President Trump. I mean, it's insanity, man. Why can't things just be simple and innocent? Hobbies like this are about innocence. it's more than just escapism. It's about having peace in your life. It's about innocence. And it's supposed to, especially as an adult, make you forget about the world's problems. But deep down in my heart, when it comes to collectibles and toys like this, it's about trying to hold on to that innocence. Again, I'm not saying you have to go play outside in the grass with your toys as a grown-ass adult. I would even find you weird. To me, these are nothing more than statues. Once in a while, like I said, I'll pick them up, I'll pose them, put them back on my shelf, and that'll take me away from reality for a little bit. I don't think grown adults should be acting like little kids anyway. I mean, unless you have kids yourself, then that's different. Playing with the pots and pans from the kitchen. But, as an adult collector, it reminds me of being innocent. It reminds me of innocence. It reminds me of peace. It reminds me of, not having to deal with the problems of being an adult. Not dealing with the violence and the politics. It's simplicity. Hobbies are about simplicity. And that's pretty much it. That's what started me collecting again. And the things that I'm currently experiencing now with the death of my dad and my buddy and, what my ex has done to me and what she continues to do to me, it's, I've really fallen into my hobbies again because, to me, it's too much to bear. It's too much to deal with. And anytime I pick up this Ken Griffey Jr. rookie, I immediately envision myself in junior high school. I pick up this Don Mattingly rookie. It wasn't just me watching baseball with my dad on TV because he was an avid Yankees fan. But I remember swapping cards and trading cards as a kid. And plus, I'm a fan. Grabbing Megatron and Optimus Prime here. These two are like the ultimate, good versus evil, just like He-Man and Skeletor right here. It was innocent. It was simple. It would get your brain flowing. I think that's what a lot of people miss today. These are essentially puzzles in their own right, as far as the Transformers are concerned. But it was about just peace and innocence. And God knows we really need that today, and so do I. I am your host, the Carolina Collector. God bless you all, and take care, everybody.